Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Millsaps College, we welcome you to the celebration of the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. I'm Lauren Brown, the president of the Pan-African Student Alliance, better known as PASA here at Millsaps College.
I'm known as Jalen Shedd, the president of Male Empowerment Network, known as MEN. And we'd like to thank you, students, faculty, staff, and friends of the Millsaps and Tougaloo community for joining us tonight to appreciate, consolidate, and reflect on Dr. King's ideas for equality for human rights, freedom, and just for being a remarkable individual.
We celebrate today not just because Dr. King brought hope and healing to America, not only for teaching future generations to stand up for their rights through nonviolent disputes, and not for the famous I Have a Dream speech, along with many others.
We celebrate today because he kept going.
Through threats against his life for just speaking his mind, he kept going.
Through beatings, bombings, and stabbings, he kept going.
Even after going to jail nearly 30 times for unreasonable situations, he kept going. He continued to be dissatisfied with the laws of injustice that were enforced at that time, how he and other oppressed individuals and communities were treated, and with America as a whole.
He gave a speech in 1967 to a junior high school in Philadelphia about what a life's blueprint should have in it. In his speech, he said, to have a belief in your own dignity, worth, and somebodyness. To have the determination to achieve excellence in your various fields of endeavor. And to finally have the commitment to the eternal principles of beauty, love, and justice. He finished his speech by saying, we must keep moving, we must keep going. By all means, we must keep moving.
Dr. King lived by these principles, and we must continue to do the same. Let us be dissatisfied. Thank you.
To Dr. Walters, to the students of Tougaloo and Millsaps, to our guests here tonight, I'm pleased to welcome you all to the Millsaps College for this evening's celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. In his remarks to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in August 1967, Dr. King began by addressing the theme of the evening, which was, where do we go from here? 55 years later, we're gathered here together in Yates Chapel, and the question of where do we go from here remains. In that question, we hear the echoes of conversations, songs, and protests that have been the foundation of progress, and yet we still have so much more to do. We still ask the question, where do we go from here? Dr. King outlined a path forward which included taking pride in personhood, organizing economic and political power, reaffirming a commitment to nonviolence, and focusing on love, what he called a strong, demanding love. These points along the path can be challenging at times, but this was Dr. King's admonition, knowing that it wouldn't be easy and reminding us as a nation that the work of change and equality would not come overnight. This is why he ended his speech that night with a call to divine dissatisfaction, a call for us to be dissatisfied until change happens that makes America and the world a better place. Let us be dissatisfied, he said. Dissatisfied with economic insecurity, dissatisfied with educational inequality, dissatisfied with political injustice. Where do we go from here? 55 years after his speech, not enough has happened, and the call to be dissatisfied remains clear. And yet there has been progress, and hope remains strong. We are here together to remind ourselves and each other of the goodness that is in each of us, of the goodness that does exist in our communities, of the goodness that, together, we can continue to walk the path laid out for us by Dr. King. We can acknowledge progress, but remain dissatisfied, yet hopeful. This past February, the Millsaps Board of Trustees approved a new strategic plan for the college, titled Destination 2027, lighting the path. And the plan includes as one of its strategic goals the work to, quote, consistently live into and demonstrate the college's commitment to being a diverse, inclusive, and just community in a way that is authentic to our history and responsive to the ongoing challenges related to equity, access, opportunity, and thriving for all our members. I'm grateful that this new strategic plan, this guiding document for Millsaps College, recognizes our own dissatisfaction. And with the help and energy and commitment of our students, faculty, and staff, and with the support of partners beyond campus, including our inspiring sister institution, Tougaloo College, that does such great work in the field of social justice, we will continue down the path laid out for us so many years ago by Dr. Martin Luther King. Thank you.
Good evening. Let me begin by thanking all of the students who are present, the faculty, staff, trustees, alumni, and friends of both Millsaps and Tougaloo College. Give yourselves a round of applause for being present today. I'm Carmen J. Walters, the 14th president of the historic Tougaloo College. I'm honored to welcome everyone to the 2023 Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. celebration, honoring the ideals, achievements, and legacy of a man who believed that education is the great equalizer. Thanks to President Perigin, the Millsaps College family, and the MLK Planning Committee for contributing to another successful celebration. I'm delighted to offer reflections on the theme, a call to conscience, let us be dissatisfied. In the landmark speech, Where Do We Go From Here, by Dr. King, he called for a nation to have a collective consciousness that embraces the values of human dignity, liberty, and civility. As we witness the revelation of inequalities, systemic racism, and other political and social unrest plaguing our nation, it is evident why a clarion call to conscience is needed. Furthermore, poverty, homelessness, gender inequality, racism, access to health care, food insecurity, violence, crime, and our eroding democracy are among the most pressing social issues prohibiting and sustaining a diverse and equitable nation. While we have made great strides, we still have not achieved the equality, the human dignity, the liberty, civility, and other ills for all Americans that Dr. King envisioned. Across the nation, scholars and activists debate critical race theory tenets that call attention to structured racism that go against everything Dr. King espoused about race relations in his I Have a Dream speech. Dr. King pictured an America where skin color would not be the judge. Dr. King imagined America's future and what must be improved to create a better nation: equal pay, better jobs, higher wages, better housing, educational equity, health equity, diversity, and inclusion. King pointed out that if addressed in the right way, these would guarantee the evolution of America into something incredible. Dr. King visualized community power, diverse groups of people united by place and vision, joining together to effect change and holding themselves accountable. Until Dr. King's dream of inalienable rights is guaranteed for all, there must be a continued call to action to disrupt behaviors and oppressive measures, structures and systems preventing collective consciousness that holds the values of human dignity, liberty, and civility. As King said, we must have divine dissatisfaction. There remains a call to conscience. More than ever, higher education institutions like ours must reflect on Dr. King's noble idea. The function of education is to teach one to think intensively and critically. Intelligence plus character. That is the goal of true education. We have a moral obligation to prepare the next generation of ethical leaders to be inspired to think, care, create, lead transformative change, and pursue understanding, tolerance, equality, inclusion, and justice. Tougaloo stands strong in its belief that social justice is the only way to change this nation. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Otis Kenner III, and I'll be sharing my reflections from the theme, Hope. As I read the renowned speech by Dr. King and breathe these words now, I hope you hear the heart of hope and justice ringing in your ears. We all have a calling to fight for what is right in the world, which is what he dedicated his life to. Being the most influential generation, and sadly the most influenced, this message should ring uncomfortably louder in our ears. There's a responsibility and a weight of stewarding the reach that we have. This message is of discomfort in a free world where people feel mentally or physically captive. Dr. King's message was one of intolerance, agony for justice, and unity. As a leader, I want to acknowledge our growth, but I want to be dissatisfied until I know the people who fall under my rule feel seen and heard. In a world digitally connected, we still have trouble understanding we are intertwined in experience and purpose, among other things. When this knowledge is obtained, you can realize that I am not alone in this fight. After years of progress, we know that there are still a litany of issues to be addressed. With that, let us use this as an opportunity to participate in the beauty of diversity. These are the most vital years of our lives. The conversations we have now shape the people we become. So in every conversation, I aim to lead in love because I am dissatisfied with hate that fuels our words and actions. Let us be dissatisfied, and men will recognize that out of one blood, God made all men to dwell upon the face of the earth. And until you and I believe that we belong here. Thank you. ready for overflow. One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours, it will be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure, we will be sure. Oh, glory, glory, glory. Oh, glory, glory. And now the war is not over, and victory isn't won. We'll fight on to the finish, and then when it's all done, we'll cry glory, oh glory, oh glory, yeah. We'll cry glory, hey glory, hey glory, oh, 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 glory, oh, oh, yeah. I'm getting ready. I'm ready for overflow. I'm getting ready. Ready for overflow. Yes, I'm ready. Ready for overflow. Yes, I'm ready. Ready for overflow. Ready for overflow. Ready for overflow. Ready for. Ready for glory.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Natalie Hampton, and I humbly serve as the 90th Tougaloo College Student Government Association President. This evening, I will provide you all with a response for this evening's service. 56 years ago, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. asked a simple but profound question that still resonates for all of us in America. Where do we go from here? Growing up in Mississippi and living in the shadows of civil unrest and ongoing distrust around issues of racism and inequality could easily make a person suspicious and jaded. Yet many of us are still most hopeful and looking forward to the future. Yes, there have been advances in race relations. Yes, there have been opportunities for equality and for some, equity. Yes, there's been progress in housing, education, and employment. Yet there are still many reasons for our modern advocates for social justice to go out with a divine dissatisfaction, as Dr. King said. As my peers and I contemplate our next steps with commencement exercises, internships, graduate, medical, and law school looming ahead, we are all well aware of our privileges and choices, but we still acknowledge our own places of dissatisfaction. As a biology major, life and health issues are of great concern to me. Living through the 2020 pandemic highlighted major areas of dissatisfaction, including great disparities in healthcare, research, and perception. But other areas of dissatisfaction also were revealed. The treatment or lack of it for over 40 million poor people in America who went without care. Social and legal injustices we witnessed, such as the live murder of George Floyd and other African Americans due to pervasive racism, the abuse and neglect of the elderly, the inequities in education for the poor and for people of color, and the discriminatory requirements for essential workers who were overly exposed and underwhelmingly protected from COVID, and the lingering differences in political and economic access through voting and representation. There's still so much that we suffered through. As we stand here today, gathered together across racial, class, gender, economic, and political lines, how are we feeling the pinch of divine dissatisfaction? Where are we surrendering power or position or even comfort to achieve equity? When we think of Dr. King's dream today, what are we willing to do to live out his values? How do we work together to build his deepest wish, a true beloved community? Our generation continues to carry the torch of divine dissatisfaction because this country, our country, has done enough to address or acknowledge the need for change and for real transformation. Never in history have we had such advances in medicine, technology, education, or science, but we are best posed to use those tools to make a change in our world. Together, we can take the future by surprise by starting today to employ all of the gifts, trainings, and powers at our disposal. Look around the room. Look at the peers, neighbors, friends, and strangers around us. This is the community. This is our beginning. Think about how we will make a change and dream together. How can we be the answer to Dr. King's question, where do we go from here? Thank you.
If I'm black and nothing else. Look at me and see the beauty beneath my blackness. In the light, bright honey tones of melanin on my high cheekbones, as the lovely rays of sun kiss my golden caramel complexion. In the stark contrast between my tan skin and the comely coil of my jet black hair, and finally glance upon the gallant souls of my ancestors in my deep brown eyes. Look and see the beauty beneath my blackness. And if you only see the blackness of my skin and nothing else, not the beauty of resilience or the black struggle, then you fail to see the long-lasting legacy of what is black, the resilience of the coil and lock. Black is the sweetness of the nectar the hummingbird drinks. Black is the silent victory of my ancestors who endured. Black is the color of panthers, obsidian, the cosmos, and me.
I had a dream, a golden shovel from Carolyn Jones. I had a dream putting together this speech, a dream that was just ever so slightly beyond the reach past my closed eyelids. I had a dream of handing this speech to Dr. King, who didn't take too well to his aide, Wyatt Walker, advising, "It's trite," he said. "It's cliche." Yeah, and so what? Black stripes are only resolved like that of fairy tales, only to be stripped away with spite. We could only dream to taste the light of freedom and rights. And thus, as a writer, just as King was a poet, I write. When I write, I dream a dream quite not like no other. I dream of crowds with all kinds of folk, not just black, cheering us on from towns far beyond us. Far beyond my pen, I hear the world shifting into something new, and I see my dream coming true. I penned the first draft and delivered the 4 strong walls of a dream past my eyelids, calls to me. Dr. King will put that dream into every person in America, the Black American dream.
the message hidden in our skin. Life is cruelty's weapon, and in this world there is no sober. As I get older, I grow bolder. As I get stronger, I overcome borders, and that is my fate. Fate that defies no race. We people are diverse, but fear not, it is no curse. And that is a message you can see, a message living inside of me. These feet tread my ancestors' sorrows, their hopes and dreams to live to see a tomorrow. And the parents of this generation are taking it for granted, making them feel as if this life is handed. But what do you see when you look at me? Do you see my desires or the dirt on my feet? Do you see me as a person or another slave to be? Do you see me as black or is my race what you see? Do you see the message in my skin or do you not see me? They put us in cages, but only then did we become free. They beat us till we were blind, but only then were we able to see. They took us from our families, but only then were we as close as can be. And now here we are, laughing at our brothers get beat. Pathetic. And that will be our downfall. And yet there is still a message that you fail to see, even though it lives in you and me. But understand it is our choice to be free. And understand black is all some will see. And understand that there is no true sympathy for us. And understand people look for us to mess up. But we have something better than all of the nations. We've thrived in the hardest situations. Resilience. We've accomplished more than others could ever think. We are black. We are beautiful. We are black history. And that is the message we carry skin deep.
Good evening. My name is Keith Dunn, and it's a great honor to serve as the Provost and Dean of the College at Millsaps. Earlier, Dr. Perigin spoke to one of the specific goals outlined in our new strategic plan, and the work being done to consistently live into and demonstrate the college's commitment to being a diverse, inclusive, and just community in a way that is authentic to our history and responsive to the ongoing challenges related to equity, access, opportunity, and thriving for all of our members. A key component of this work is found in our efforts to partner with individuals and institutions who share this commitment, because we believe that together our work can be more meaningful. Together, we can shift our dissatisfaction into meaningful action. Our newest partner at Millsaps is the Medgar and Merle Evers Institute, with whom we signed a memorandum of understanding this past fall. The Institute, which will share space on campus, actually just behind us, with the Mississippi Center for Investigative Reporting, led by Jerry Mitchell, will engage and challenge our students across a broad spectrum of work, including research, writing, politics, and this spring, the 60th commemoration of the assassination of Medgar Evers. Leading this work is Rena Evers Everett, daughter of Medgar and Merle Evers and executive director of the Medgar and Merle Evers Institute. We are proud to partner with her and the Institute, knowing that we will work side by side to answer the question of where do we go from here? As a personal point of pride about this partnership, it was one of my greatest honors to introduce Merle Evers here at Millsaps in 2013 for her Rabbi Nussbaum lecture. And tonight, it is my pleasure to introduce and officially welcome Rena Evers Everett to Millsaps College and to our observance of this evening.
Good evening. It is truly a day of reckoning. It's a day to ask again and again, let us be dissatisfied? It's a day to ask yourself, are you dissatisfied? I am very pleased and extremely happy that we are in partnership with Millsaps, and extremely happy to be asked to introduce my friend. And before I get to his personal bio, I just want to say that Dr. King is not just about one day. It's not just about his birthday, it's not about his death, it's about his life. What we do to honor him is about what he stood for. And so there's a quote that I thought appropriate for this evening because of who's going to be our guest speaker. Dr. King said, "Change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability." But, and if I can get this phone right. Okay, too many pictures going on, sorry. You know, that always is the case, right, when you think you got it all right. But comes through continuous struggle. And so we must straighten our backs and work for our freedom. Straighten our backs and work for our freedom. Our guest speaker tonight walks with a straight back. Our guest speaker tonight works for his freedom. He works for all of our freedom. Reverend Dr. C.J. Rhodes is a native of Hazelhurst, Mississippi. His parents brought him up to understand the meaning of freedom. They were movers and shakers of the Mississippi Civil Rights Movement. But you know, we come into this world our own being. And I'm going to do a personal privilege and call you just CJ. CJ listened to a higher voice, and he was called into the ministry at age of 18. A month after graduating with honors from Hazelhurst High School. But at Hazelhurst High School, he helped retrieve and enhance the student government. So much of what I see you're doing, the ones, your students that have been up on this stage already. You're enhancing not only the student government, but you're enhancing our lives. And so he went on to be a student representative to the school board. So he made his sights further than just his college or just his high school at that time. He went on to receive his BA in philosophy from the University of Mississippi in 2004, where he also served student government and was a leading student voice for racial justice and reconciliation. And at that point, he personally came into the Evers family's sight. CJ was one of the first in the institute that my mother, Merle Evers, started, the Medgar Evers Institute. He was one of the first youth think tank attendees and did a fabulous job. And went on to say, I want to do this work. This is what I'm called for. But he had the higher calling. So in 2009, he received his Master's of Divinity from Duke University Divinity School, and he earned his Doctor of Ministry from Wellesley Biblical Seminary in 2018. Before getting his, did I say cemetery? Because you're not going there. That came out and that just hit me. No, we're not going there, we're going to seminary. Correction. We're all standing upright 6 feet. Okay, well, me 5. Before getting his doctorate, CJ gained continuing education in the inaugural Mississippi Black Leadership Institute, as well as Princeton's Seminary inaugural Black Theology and Leadership Institute. Now, he had a nickname. You know what his nickname was? Scholar with a holla. So this scholar with a holla has been sought after not only as a preacher, a thought leader, and a communicator, but as a trusted friend and visionary. Dr. Rhodes now, Reverend Dr. Rhodes, is a pastor of the oldest Black church. Actually, he was the youngest pastor for the oldest Black church in Jackson, Mount Helm Baptist Church. He has given such great leadership to that church, to the community. He assisted in construction of Helm Place, a mixed-income housing development. But one other link that we have together, my parents, but also CJ. He's employed at Alcorn State University. He serves as the Director of Religious and Spiritual Life, founder director of Hiram Rhodes Revels Institute for Ethical Leadership, and the interim director of the Merle Evers Williams Honors Program. I thank you for that. Now, there's several other things that he has done, and I'm going to skip a couple of them because I want to get to one thing that you really need to know about him. There's several things, but he's the author of 2 books, 7 Leadership Principles of Service and Success, and then Deeper Still, Ministry Empowered by the Holy Spirit. He's also the 3rd Vice President of General Missionary Baptist State Convention of Mississippi, Board Chair for Mission Mississippi, and a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity. Above all, he is a servant leader. And he's the proud, proud dad of twin sons. Now, there's some words I want you to listen to that Reverend Dr. C.J. Rhodes wrote or expressed in the late 2020 that really embodies who he is and where we need to go forward, because we have to listen to our past. We have to be present in order to go into the future. So he said a couple words. Some open doors lead to hallways. Not every open door invites you into the destination, but rather the next phase of expansion. Trust that journey. Trauma doesn't have to lead to drama. You can't control what happens to you, but you do have to you do have more control over how you respond. You are no less valuable if you get therapy. Know your value, even when others want the 5-finger discount. You are too valuable to be played for cheap. Make no excuses for that. 2 more, and that's how I'm going to end. Building bridges is better than erecting walls. It is not just the president or any official who wants a wall. Too many folks, especially on social media, are experts at division. I choose, he chooses to be a diplomat. This is the one that resonates to me a lot. And we're honoring one of these right now. Pioneers are first mocked, then modeled. When you do a new thing, there will be those who try to tear it down. Later on, you will be a model for the same people. Dr. King tried new things. Dr. King is a model for the ages. Reverend Dr. C.J. Rhodes is a visionary for us now. Please stand and put your hands together for Reverend C.J. Rhodes.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, Rena. I'll have to take you on the road with me because apparently that was some good stuff there. I didn't pay you to say any of that, so I appreciate that. Good evening to President Perigin and President Walters, to all of our program participants, again to Rena for that introduction, and by way of a brief sort of side comment, I had the pleasure not only of meeting her mother at the University of Mississippi, but working with her for a few months at Alcorn State University when she was then the scholar in residence, and I got a chance to sit at her feet and learn all the background stories about Brother Medgar and how he fought for our freedom here in Mississippi. Let's give the Evers family and Rena a round of applause. To fellow members of the clergy, I see among us Bishop Sharma Lewis of the Mississippi United Methodist Conference, Bishop Brian Sage, the now retiring, yes, Bishop of the Mississippi Episcopal Church, to those ice-cold men of distinction of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, of which Dr. King was a part. Let's give God praise for the Alphas. Amen. To members of Mount Helm who are present, and to all of you gathered here. It is a joy and a privilege to be here tonight at Millsaps College. My dad, Attorney Carol Rhodes, was one of the first rural black Mississippians to integrate Millsaps back in 1969, I believe. And it's so wonderful and awesome to be back here on these grounds and to celebrate with you the life, the legacy, and leadership of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. So much has already been said tonight about King's lasting words from his speech that has been titled, "Where Do We Go From Here?" It was King's last message as the president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference that he helped to found and lead. In 1967, he stood at the near end of his life, almost a year before his tragic assassination, to reflect upon what had been accomplished to date what was left undone, and what needed to be done going on from here. His words in that particular message are words that were timely then, but also timely now. I'm thankful that we're gathered here tonight, knowing of so many of Dr. King's quotations. In fact, my own journey with Dr. King began in high school arena when, as a senior, my oral communications teacher slid an audio cassette. Most of us in the room know what that is, but some of you may not remember or know what an audio cassette is. We're sitting at the kitchen, not the kitchen, but at the cafeteria table. She slid the cassette to me and said, "I want you to do a Dr. King speech at the upcoming Black History Month program." At that time, I was a very shy young person. I did not want to get up in front of my peers, and I said, "You know what, Mrs. Robinson, I'm not going to do that." She said in reply, "I'm not asking you to do it, I'm telling you, take this audio cassette, listen to side A and side B, and come back ready to offer a speech on behalf of the legacy of Dr. King." I remember taking that audio cassette home, listening to all of the messages. You know, we had all heard "I Have a Dream." It was kind of played out at the time. And so I decided to go with his drum major instinct message, as well as his "I've been to the mountaintop," and tried to put those two together and practice my Martin Luther King Jr. voice. The morning of the program, Mama heard me in the bedroom trying to practice. Says, "Baby, you don't sound like Dr. King." I told Mrs. Robinson I didn't want to do this. I remember getting up and sharing those words, and Dr. King's words have been with me ever since. But sometimes we find ourselves excerpting parts of his message without understanding the full context of his message. Those of you who are preachers or literary scholars know that a text without a pretext is a setup for a con. And so we have to oftentimes look at the words in context to understand what exactly a person is saying. When we read and reflect upon the words of Dr. King in that message in 1967, we hear a man who was frustrated. Yes, we know about the successes in Montgomery in 1954 and the March on Washington in 1963, but around 1965, things began to change for Dr. King. As the movement began to move from the South into the North, he went to Chicago and a suburb of Chicago called Cicero. He said there in Cicero, "I experienced such great racism from whites that I've never experienced to date in the South." He hadn't experienced racism like that in Selma or Birmingham or Jackson, but in Cicero, he discovered there's a whole new leg of this movement making. But not only that, he began to appreciate the fact that though there had been many strides for civil rights and voting rights over the years, there were some issues. And as a prisoner of conscience, he understood that he had to cry aloud and spare not, regardless of if those words would hurt or hinder his friends. Around the time of 1967, Dr. King began to cry loud and spare not against the Vietnam War. And so many of his stalwarts in the movement turned their backs on him. Both white and black and other began to turn their backs on him as he began to speak out against President Johnson, who had signed into law the various civil rights and voting rights legislations. But he understood that as prophetic witnesses, we have to constantly keep our finger on the pulse, or we find ourselves going backward. So he began his message that day, his last message as the president of the SCLC, asking a question: where are we now? I think it's important for any leader worth her or his salt to assess the present state of things, to know where are we, not where we were 10 years ago, not of our successes back yonder. I'm glad that Millsaps and Tougaloo are putting together those strategic plans, because we can rest on the laurels of what Millsaps was. Y'all can talk back to me, I'm a Baptist preacher. you could rest on what Tougaloo was, but there's a reality right now that has to be addressed. And King in 1967, despite all of the achievements of the civil rights movement to date, recognized there was still housing inequality, still income inequality, still high unemployment rates and infant mortality rates and educational segregation after the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education. He understood that there was still work to be done. Yes, we have come a mighty long way. On a day like today, we often talk about how far we've come and what Dr. King's dream was, but sometimes we fail to make a proper assessment of just how bad things still are for too many people. There are still too many people in Mississippi whose backs are against the wall. There are still a lot of us who in parts of Jackson do not have clean drinking water and bathing water. I wish I had a witness in here. There are issues that are Millsaps education, that are Tougaloo education, that the church must address here and now. King said, where are we now? That's the question before us tonight. Where are we today in 2023? Are we that much better than we were 56 years ago? Have there been areas where the clock has been turned back on our rights? I used to say, Brother Chauncey, that I wish I had grown up in the 1950s and 60s because I would have marched with Dr. King. Now I say that as a man who wasn't born then, because a lot of folk who claimed to have marched with King did not. A lot of folks who said they were fighting alongside Brother Medgar were not fighting alongside Brother Medgar, but I assumed that if I had been there, I would have marched with him until I lived for the last few years. I said, oh, these times feel a lot like the eyes on the prize times I saw in school. We've got some difficult days ahead, but not only did King say, where are we now? He then asked the more familiar question, where do we go from here? After we have accomplished so many achievements, after we have assessed the present reality, he said, where do we go from here? And offers in his message at least three things I want to leave with you that I believe are still relevant for us today. Where do we go from here? First of all, he says we must massively assert dignity and worth by developing an unassailable, majestic sense of values. I know we're in a mixed audience tonight, but Dr. King was very much concerned in 1967 that black folk really knew who they were. He understood that as much as we had advanced in laws and legislation, if our people felt an inferiority complex, that we would never truly rise up to be the people we need to be. Listen to what he says, and forgive the masculine-centered language. These are King's words. To upset this cultural homicide, the Negro must rise up with an affirmation of his own Olympian manhood. Any movement for the Negro's freedom that overlooks this necessity is only waiting to be buried. As long as the mind is enslaved, the body can never be free. Psychological freedom, a firm sense of self-esteem, is the most powerful weapon against the long night of physical slavery. No Lincolnian Emancipation Proclamation or Johnsonian Civil Rights Bill can totally bring this kind of freedom. The Negro will only be free when he reaches down to the inner depths of his own being and signs with the pen and ink of assertive manhood his own Emancipation Proclamation. And with a spirit straining toward self-esteem, the Negro must boldly throw off the manacles of self-abnegation and say to himself and to the world, I am somebody. I am a person. I am a man with dignity and honor. I have a rich and noble history. How painful and exploited that history has been. Yes, I was a slave through my foreparents, and I'm not ashamed of that. I'm ashamed of the people who were so sinful to make me a slave. Yes, we must stand up and say, I'm black and I'm beautiful. And this self-affirmation is the black person's need made compelling by the white man's crimes against him. End quote. Brothers and sisters, as we fight over whether or not critical race theory is in fact taught in K-12, let alone if it should be, the reality is, whether we're talking about K-12 education or liberal arts education at Millsaps or Tougaloo, we must have the kind of education that centers the psychological freedom of black folks. Because we will never fully lean into the fullness of who we are if we don't know where we've been. It ought not be said in Jackson, Mississippi, you can drive up and down J.R. Lynch Street but not know who John Roy Lynch was. Y'all can clap. It makes no sense to have gone to Alcorn State University and not know who Hiram Rhodes Revels was. It's a shame to go up and down Medgar Evers Boulevard and not know the cost and the sacrifice paid by Brother Medgar. Not enough for us to come here and celebrate if we don't understand the toil of Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer and so many people who rose up and said they're sick and tired of being sick and tired. There comes a moment when you got to love the texture of your hair, the complexion of your skin, the size of your lips, your hips, and your fingertips, and you can declare, I am somebody. Can y'all just come on with me? Say, I am somebody. I am somebody. I may be black, but I'm somebody. Come on, put your hands together. But secondly, not only did he say that we must assert the dignity and worth of black people who have had our backs against the wall for so long, secondly, he said we must organize our strength in terms of economic and political power. Quote, there's nothing wrong with power if power is used correctly. You see, what happened is that some of our philosophers got off base, and one of the great problems of history is that the concepts of love and power have usually been contrasted as opposites, polar opposites, so that love is identified with a resignation of power and power with a denial of love. Dr. King pressed his point in that room full of preachers and said to them that very often the church has denied power, has said getting involved in political things is not the role of the church. But he said if you use power correctly for the right ends, you can change the lives of people. What would it look like if the institutional power of our churches, just the Baptists and Methodists and Episcopalians in the room tonight, collectively could change banking in Mississippi? If a bunch of black churches in Jackson said, we're tired of banks not giving us certain kinds of loans, we're going to take our money out of X bank and put it into Y bank, they'll give you loans all of a sudden because, bring that money back over here. What would it look like if Millsaps and Tougaloo, not to give y'all any homework, got together and said, we're going to collectively change some issues around water and sewer and racial inequity in Jackson, Mississippi? What would happen if we collectivized our power? You want to know what's one of our problems? Too many of us want to do it our own way alone. But what would happen if we come together and strengthen our power together? There's a scene in the movie Soul Food where I'm gonna call it Big Mama was dying. The family was falling apart. But she gave them an illustration and said, look at your hand. Y'all lift your hand, your right hand up, lift your hand up. If you look at your hand, you see all these fingers individually, but if you bring all those fingers together into a fist can strike a mighty blow. Some of us are trying to strike a blow with racism with one finger, but if we put all of our fingers together, we can strike a mighty blow to injustice and inequity in our own time. Thirdly and lastly, Dr. King shared not only the assertion of human dignity and the power of organizing strength, but then thirdly, he offered something that was probably more radical than what is often ignored or eclipsed or evaded in the body of his work. He said, quote, the movement must address itself to the question of the restructuring the whole of American society. 1967, Dr. King really in some ways shifted his focus from the civil rights for black folk to this broader campaign against poverty called the Poor People's Campaign. And he wanted to make sure we connected the dots between poor blacks in the Delta and poor whites in Appalachia. And he was beginning to move all of those efforts toward the reality that until America dealt more deeply with the inequity baked in the cake of our economic system, that we would never truly live up to the full meaning of liberty. Now, he hastened to make sure that the record was clear that he was not calling for communism, but he said the higher synthesis of the thesis of communism's ignorance of the individual and the antithesis of capitalism's ignorance of social life must bring about a third way of redistributionism. Can I use a scary word? Of reparation. Y'all got real quiet right there. I thought I was at Millsaps College. He understood that if anything in America is really going to change, it has to change economically. Because even today, there's still major gaps and chasms from folk who just got started making a little money 30 years ago. When there are many in our state and nation who are hundreds of years ahead because of slave labor. I believe, brothers and sisters, that we can leave here tonight trusting that we can be dissatisfied as long as we do not have dignity and worth as a people, as long as we have not organized our strength in terms of economic and political power, and as long as America is still a place for the haves and not the have-nots. And so I leave you again with Dr. King's own words. So I conclude by saying again today that we have a task, and let us go out with a divine dissatisfaction. Let us be dissatisfied until America will no longer have a high blood pressure of creeds and an anemia of deeds. Let us be dissatisfied until the tragic walls that separate the outer city of wealth and comfort and the inner city of poverty and despair shall be crushed by the battering rams of the forces of justice. Let us be dissatisfied until those that live on the outskirts of hope are brought into the metropolis of daily security. Let us be dissatisfied until slums are cast into the junk heaps of history and every family is living in a decent sanitary home. Let us be dissatisfied until the dark yesterdays of segregated schools will be transformed into bright tomorrows of quality, integrated education. Let us be dissatisfied until integration is not seen as a problem but as an opportunity to participate in the beauty of diversity. Let us be dissatisfied until men and women, however black they may be, will be judged on the basis of the content of their character and not on the basis of the color of their skin. Let us be dissatisfied. Let us be dissatisfied until every state capital houses a governor who will do justly, who will love mercy, and who will walk humbly with his God. Let us be dissatisfied until from every city hall, justice will roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Let us be dissatisfied until that day when the lion and the lamb shall lie down together and every man will sit under his own vine and fig tree and none shall be afraid. Let us be dissatisfied and men will recognize that out of one blood made God all men to dwell upon the face of the earth together. Let us be dissatisfied until that day when nobody will shout white power, when no one will shout black power, but everybody will talk about God's power and human power. Let us be dissatisfied.
Dr. King concluded his 1967 speech by saying that, quote, "We have a task and let us go out with divine dissatisfaction." Please join us in a responsive reading as we remember his words of divine dissatisfaction and consider their relevance in our world today.
Let us be dissatisfied until America will no longer have a high blood pressure of creeds and an anemia of deeds.
Let us be dissatisfied until the treasury of laws that separate the wealthy and comfortable from the impoverished and weary shall be crushed by the battering rams of the forces of justice and knowledge.
Let us be dissatisfied until those who live on the outskirts of hope are brought into the metropolis of those daily securities.
Let us be dissatisfied until slums are cast into the junk heaps of history, and every family will live in a decent sanitary home.
Let us be dissatisfied until the darkness of yesterdays of segregated schools will be transformed into bright tomorrows of quality integrated education.
Let us be dissatisfied until integration is not seen as a problem, but as an opportunity to participate in the beauty of diversity.
Let us be dissatisfied until all persons, however black they may be, will be judged on the basis of the content of their character, not on the basis of the color of their skin.
Let us be dissatisfied until every state capital will become housed by elected officials who will do justice, who will love mercy, and who will walk in humility.
Let us be dissatisfied until from every city hall justice will roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream.
Let us be dissatisfied until the day when the lion and the lamb shall lie down together, and every person will sit under his own vine and fig tree, and none shall be afraid.
Let us be dissatisfied until people recognize that out of one blood God made all people to dwell upon the face of the earth.
Let us be dissatisfied until the day when nobody will shout black power, when nobody will shout black power, but everybody will talk about God's power and human power.
In Dr. King's words, quote, "I must confess, my friends, that the road ahead will not always be smooth. There will still be rocky places of frustration and meandering points of bewilderment. There will be inevitable setbacks here and there will be those moments when the buoyancy of hope will be transformed into the fatigue of despair. Our dreams will sometimes be shattered and our ethereal hopes blasted. We may again, with tear-drenched eyes, have to stand before the bier of some courageous civil rights worker whose life will be snuffed out by the dastardly acts of bloodthirsty mobs. But difficult and painful as it is, we must walk on in the days ahead with an audacious faith in the future. And as we continue our charted course, we may gain consolation from the words so nobly left by that great black bard, who was also a great freedom fighter of yesterday, James Weldon Johnson. Please stand as we sing, lift every voice and sing.
like to thank you again for coming out to celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. We thank all the participants for their efforts and preparations for tonight. We also thank our guest speaker, Dr. C.J. Rhodes, and everyone that contributed to the planning and assembly of this program, along with Tougaloo for their help and support. We ask if you have the time that you'll join us afterwards in our reception. It will be held in the event center right up the hallway. We also ask if you have time that you'll join us tomorrow for our National Day of Racial Healing events. We'll be having a conversation with Brittany Wilson and Macy Brown, a local social justice activist, in the Leggett Living Room at 11:40. Lunch will be provided.
There will also be a film screening of The Evers in McMullen Lecture Hall this Thursday, January 19th at 6:00 p.m. Following the film, we will host a conversation between Rena Evers Everett from the Medgar and Murley Evers Institute and Jerry Mitchell from the Mississippi Center for Investigative Reporting. There will also be a reception at this event. Before we leave today, we ask that you stay dissatisfied. There is always room for improvement. Thank you.